Captain Vrell of the Galactic Trade Consortium had survived 43 standard cycles in deep space. He'd negotiated with the hive-minded Kresh, shared drinks with the methane-breathing Corlix, and once accidentally insulted a Thalaxian ambassador so badly the incident required 3 diplomats and a ceremonial apology cake. But nothing, absolutely nothing in his extensive career had prepared him for humanity. The briefing had been simple enough. Earth was applying for provisional membership. Send a delegation, do the standard assessments, file the paperwork. Easy. Routine. Except the moment Captain Vrell saw Lieutenant Kira haze across the docking bay, every survival instinct he'd inherited from his prey species ancestors started screaming. "Welcome to Earth Station Meridian," she said, extending her hand in that bizarre, human greeting ritual. Her voice was pleasant, professional, completely at odds with what Vrell's body was telling him to do, which was run fast, preferably to another galaxy. Because when she looked at him, really looked at him, her pupils dilated. Just slightly. Just enough. Vrell had seen that look before, on every predator planet he'd ever visited. It was the look a Scarvan hunting cat gave right before it pounced. It was the look a Mordian sand viper gave right before it struck. It was predator focus, pure and simple, and it was coming from a species that supposedly evolved from tree-dwelling fruit eaters. "Captain Vrell, are you all right?" Lieutenant Hayes tilted her head, concern flickering across her features. "You look pale." "Well, paler than your file photos suggested." "Fine," Vrell managed, his translator chip working overtime to convert his chittering into something resembling standard galactic. "Perfectly fine. Just, adjusting to your atmospheric composition." That was a lie. His species breathed oxygen-nitrogen mixtures just fine. What he was adjusting to was the slow, creeping realization that humanity's application materials might have left out some rather important details. Behind him, Science Officer Kix made a strangled sound that their species used to indicate existential dread. "Captain," Kix whispered, their antennae quivering, "did you see that?" "The pupils?" "Yes." "The teeth?" Vrell looked again. Lieutenant Hayes was smiling, a gesture meant to convey friendliness. Except humans had somehow evolved to show their teeth when they were happy, which was exactly what every predator in the known galaxy did right before they ate you. "I'm seeing them," Vrell confirmed. "This is fine," Kix said, in a tone that suggested it was definitely not fine. "This is completely fine. We've dealt with predator species before." "Name one." "The Corrections." "The Corrections eat rocks," Kix. "Rocks. Still technically predators." Lieutenant Hayes started walking, and the delegation had no choice but to follow. She moved with an easy grace that Vrell's hindbrain immediately cataloged as efficient movement patterns, energy conservation, the gait of something built for pursuit. Her boots barely made sound on the metal decking. Meanwhile, Vrell's own footsteps echoed like a dinner bell. "I've prepared a full itinerary," Hayes continued, pulling up a holographic display. "Today we'll tour our primary facilities. Tomorrow, you'll meet with our diplomatic corps. We're very excited about potential membership." Excited. That word sounded so innocent when humans said it. "Your species' history," Vrell began carefully, "indicates a largely peaceful development. Agricultural societies, philosophical traditions, democratic governments." "That's right." Hayes nodded, her ponytail swishing. "We've had our conflicts, of course, but we've worked hard to move past them. And your position on the predator-prey spectrum would be..." Hayes stopped walking, turned, and for just a moment, Vrell saw something flicker behind her eyes. Something old. Something that remembered when humans weren't the dominant species on their planet, when they had to fight for every meal, every territory, every breath. "Omnivore," she said simply. "We eat plants and meat. Is that a problem?" The way she asked made it very clear that it better not be a problem. "No problem at all," Vrell said quickly. "Just, gathering data for the assessment." They continued the tour. Hayes pointed out hydroponics bays, recycling systems, recreational facilities. All very impressive. All very civilized. Except Vrell couldn't stop noticing the little things. The way human eyes tracked movement with unnerving accuracy. The way they positioned themselves in rooms, always with clear sight lines, never cornered. The way Lieutenant Hayes casually mentioned that yes, humans still practice combat sports for fun. "Captain," Kix whispered again, I've been reviewing their military history. And they had 2 global wars. In the last century, they invented weapons that could destroy their entire planet. Multiple times. And they're still here. Vrell's stomach sank. They survived their own extinction events. Repeatedly. By fighting. Extensively. Lieutenant Hayes glanced back at them, and her pupils did that thing again. That dilation. That focus. Everything okay back there, gentlemen? Wonderful. Vrell lied through his mandibles. Just admiring your station's architecture. She smiled all teeth. Wait until you see our weapons range. I think you'll find it very educational. Yes, Vrell thought miserably. That's exactly what I'm afraid of. The weapons range turned out to be exactly as terrifying as Vrell had imagined, possibly worse. Lieutenant Hayes demonstrated something called a handgun, with the casual ease of someone showing off a new communication device, not a tool designed to punch holes through living tissue at supersonic speeds. Standard issue for security personnel, she explained, hitting a target dead center from 30 meters. Without using any computerized assistance. Just her eyes, her hands, and whatever horrifying coordination her species had evolved. We also have plasma rifles for extreme situations, but those require special certification. Extreme situations, Vrell repeated faintly. Such as, Hayes holstered the weapon. Oh, you know, hull breaches, hostile boardings, space pirate encounters. The usual. As if encountering space pirates was something that happened every other Tuesday. Your species encounters hostile forces frequently. Science Officer Kix asked, their voice pitched slightly higher than normal. A sure sign of stress. Not as much anymore, Hayes said cheerfully. We got pretty good at discouraging them. Last group that tried to raid one of our outer colonies got. Well, let's just say they spread the word. We haven't had an incident in almost 8 months. 8 months. They considered 8 months a long time between violent encounters. Vrell was beginning to suspect that humanity's application for consortium membership had been deliberately vague about certain aspects of their culture. The section on conflict resolution strategies had been surprisingly brief. Now he understood why. You couldn't exactly write, "We shot them until they stopped," in an official diplomatic document. The tour continued through the afternoon. Hayes remained professionally pleasant, answering every question with impressive patience. But Vrell couldn't shake the feeling that he was being evaluated just as thoroughly as he was evaluating humanity. Every time he glanced at Hayes, those pupils dilated again. Predator focus. Like she was measuring distances, calculating vectors, assessing threats without even realizing she was doing it was instinctual. Which was somehow worse than if it had been deliberate. By the time they reached Observation Deck 7, Vrell's nerves were stretched thinner than a singularity's event horizon. The deck offered a spectacular view of Earth rotating below, all blues and greens, and swirling white clouds. Beautiful, peaceful, completely at odds with what Vrell now knew about the species that called it home. I thought you might appreciate seeing our homeworld directly, Hayes said, gesturing at the massive viewport. Earth is, well, she's something special to us. She, Kix asked. Humans often assign gender to things we care about. Ships, planets, storms. Don't ask me why, it's just something we do. Vrell moved closer to the viewport, genuinely curious despite his mounting anxiety. Earth did look remarkable, vibrant, alive. The kind of planet that bred strong species, competitive species, species that had to fight for survival against a million different threats. That's when the alarm started blaring. Proximity alert, a calm computer voice announced. Unidentified vessel approaching station. Distance, 40,000 kilometers, and closing. Broadcast attempt failed. Repeating hail. Hayes's entire demeanor changed in an instant. The friendly tour guide vanished, replaced by something sharp and focused, and utterly calm under pressure. She tapped her wrist communicator. Hayes to command. Status report. Unknown configuration, Lieutenant. Not broadcasting standard identification codes. They're not responding to any communication attempts. Vrell watched, fascinated and horrified, as Hayes's expression settled into something calculating. Her eyes swept the observation deck, cataloging exits, cover positions, potential threats. All in approximately 2 seconds. Could be a malfunction, she said, but her body language suggested she didn't believe that for a moment. Or pirates testing our response time. Command, Bring defense grid to standby. Don't activate weapons yet, but let's be ready. Pirates. She'd said pirates like some people said rain. An inconvenience, not a crisis. Shouldn't we evacuate? Kix asked, their antennae completely flat against their head. Seek shelter? Panic appropriately. Hayes looked confused. From one ship? It's probably nothing. But if you'd feel more comfortable in a secured area, I can escort you to the command center. If they'd feel more comfortable. As if being near an unidentified vessel that might contain hostile forces was a matter of personal preference, not basic survival instinct. Yes, Vrell said immediately. Yes, we would feel much more comfortable. They'd barely made it to the corridor when the station shuddered. Not violently, but enough to notice. Enough to send every prey instinct Vrell possessed into overdrive. Warning, the computer announced. Weapons lock detected. Defensive countermeasures deploying. Hayes broke into a run, and Vrell discovered that humans could move disturbingly fast when motivated. She didn't look panicked. She looked focused, purposeful, like she'd trained for exactly this scenario 1,000 times. Which, Vrell was beginning to suspect, she probably had. Command, this is Hayes. Delegation is with me, moving to secured location. Permission to engage if fired upon. Granted, Lieutenant. Show them why we don't get many repeat visitors. The way Command said that, with a hint of dark humor, made Vrell's blood run cold. Or whatever the equivalent was for his species. They reached an intersection just as another shudder ran through the station. Stronger this time. Hayes stopped, pulled out that handgun again, and positioned herself between the delegation and the corridor leading to the outer hull. Stay behind me, she ordered. Not suggested. Ordered. Is the station breached? Kix's voice was nearly a squeak now. Doubtful. Our hull can take a lot more than that. But protocols exist for a reason. Hayes's eyes were scanning the corridor, never stopping, always moving. Predator focus dialed up to maximum. If someone does board, they'll find out pretty quickly that humans don't appreciate uninvited guests. Vrell believed her. Completely. Absolutely. Without question, another shudder. Then silence. Hayes's communicator crackled. All stations, hostile vessel retreating. Repeat, hostile vessel in full retreat. They fired one shot. We lit them up with targeting lasers, and they apparently decided discretion was the better part of valor. Hayes visibly relaxed, but only slightly. She kept the gun out. Copy that, Command. What's our status? Minor hull scoring, already sealed. No casualties. They didn't even scratch the paint, really. Just wanted to test our response time. Looks like. And they learned not to test it again, Hayes said with satisfaction. She holstered the weapon, then turned to face Vrell and Kix with an apologetic smile. Sorry about that. Welcome to humanity's neighborhood. We tend to get provocateurs sometimes. They rarely try twice. Because humans shot back. Immediately. Accurately. Without hesitation. This happens often. Vrell managed. Often enough that we're ready for it. Hayes started walking again, her stride casual once more. Shall we continue to the command center? I think you'll find our defensive capabilities quite impressive. Vrell exchanged a look with Kix. They were both thinking the same thing. Humanity's application was going to require some very carefully worded addendums. Possibly an entirely new classification system. Maybe a warning label. Lead the way. Vrell said weakly. As they walked, he noticed Hayes's pupils had returned to normal size. The immediate threat had passed. The predator focus had deactivated. She was back to being a pleasant, professional tour guide, until the next threat appeared. And that, Vrell realized, was the most unsettling thing of all. The command center turned out to be less a room and more a strategic nerve cluster that would make a consortium battle cruiser weep with envy. Holographic displays floated everywhere, showing ship trajectories, defense grid status, and what appeared to be enough firepower to reduce a small moon to component atoms. Commander Jacob Torres looked up from a tactical display, saw Hayes and the delegation, and grinned. Actually grinned, like they hadn't just been shot at by space pirates. Lieutenant Hayes, glad you kept our guests safe. Gentlemen, apologies for the excitement. We don't usually get target practice during official visits. Target practice. He'd called it target practice. Commander, Vrell said, struggling to maintain diplomatic composure. Your response time was quite remarkable. How long did it take to acquire weapons lock? 2.3 seconds, Torres said proudly. Could have been faster, but we wanted to give them a chance to identify themselves. We're not monsters. Not monsters. Right. They just had response times that would make a Corinthian shock trooper jealous. And the vessel retreated after you established targeting lock. Kix asked, furiously taking notes on their data pad, probably documenting everything for the psychological trauma report they'd be filing later. They saw our full defensive array light up and decided today wasn't a good day to die, Torres explained. Smart pirates know when they're outgunned. Dumb ones become debris fields. Natural selection at work. Natural selection. The commander had just casually referenced evolutionary pressure as it applied to criminal deterrence. Hayes cleared her throat. Sir, perhaps we should move to conference room 3? Continue the official assessment in a more comfortable setting. Good idea, Lieutenant. I'll join you shortly. Just need to file the incident report. Won't take long. We've got templates for this sort of thing. Templates? For pirate attacks. Because they happened often enough to require standardized paperwork. Conference room 3 was mercifully less intimidating than the command center. Comfortable chairs, a proper conference table, refreshments arranged on a side counter. Hayes poured herself something dark and steaming from a thermal container. Coffee, Vrell's database informed him. A caffeinated beverage humans consumed in quantities that would hospitalize most species. Can I get you anything? Hayes asked politely. We have water, various juices, some Thalaxian mineral supplements if you prefer. Water is fine, Vrell said, mostly because his throat felt like he'd been breathing vacuum. Kix just shook their head, probably still processing the last hour of their lives. Hayes handed over the water, then settled into a chair across from them. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Hayes sighed, a very human gesture that somehow conveyed exhaustion and amusement in equal measure. You're going to reject our application, aren't you? The directness caught Vrell off guard. That's not. We haven't completed the assessment. Captain, I'm not blind. I can see how you've been looking at us all day. Like we're one bad moment away from eating you. Hayes took a sip of her coffee, maintaining eye contact. You're prey species. Most of the consortium is. And we're not. Kix made a strangled sound. You know? Of course we know. We've been studying consortium composition for 3 years while preparing this application. 78% prey species evolution, 19% scavengers, 3% omnivores, and exactly 0 persistence predators except the corrections, who, as you pointed out, eat rocks. Hayes leaned forward. You want to know what scares you about humans? I'll tell you. We're apex predators who decided to be civilized. Past tense decided. It's a choice we make every single day, not something that was bred into us over millions of years. The room felt smaller suddenly. Vrell's water glass trembled slightly in his hands. Our ancestors, Hayes continued, her voice calm and measured, hunted animals bigger and stronger and faster than themselves. We didn't have claws or fangs or venom. We had brains and endurance and the absolute stubborn refusal to give up. We'd track prey for days, weeks even, until it literally collapsed from exhaustion. Then we'd kill it, cook it, eat it, and paint pictures of the experience on cave walls to celebrate. Kix was making a continuous high-pitched whine now, their species equivalent of a scream. And yes, Hayes said, we turned those same skills on each other for most of our history. Wars, conflicts, territorial disputes. We got very, very good at violence. Exceptional at it, actually. But then something interesting happened. We looked around at all the destruction we'd caused and said, collectively, maybe we should try something different. Maybe cooperation gets us further than competition. Maybe we don't have to be defined by our worst instincts. She set down her coffee cup. The sound of ceramic on table seemed unnaturally loud. So we built the United Earth government. We dismantled most of our weapons of mass destruction. We created laws, ethics committees, diplomatic corps. We turned our predator instincts toward problems instead of people, hunting solutions instead of prey. And it worked. Not perfectly, not without setbacks, but it worked. Commander Torres entered the room, tablet in hand, just in time to hear Hayes' speech. He nodded approvingly. The lieutenant makes a good point. You're worried about what we were. We're more interested in what we're becoming. But the pupils, Vrell blurted out. The focus, the response time, that's all still there. Those are predator adaptations. Yes, Torres agreed simply. They are. Can't change millions of years of evolution overnight. But we can choose what we do with those adaptations. Today, for example, we use them to protect this station and our guests. We put ourselves between you and danger without hesitation. That's what predators do when they decide to be protectors instead of threats. Hayes pulled up a holographic display showing statistics. Crime rates on Earth and all human colonies. Down 47% in the last decade. Violent conflicts between human factions. 0 in the last 6 years. Charitable giving to disaster relief, medical research, educational programs. Up across the board. We're not perfect, but we're trying. Really, genuinely trying to be better than our biology says we should be. Vrell looked at the numbers. Looked at Hayes. Looked at Torres. Both of them watching him with those unervingly focused eyes, pupils dilating slightly, because that's what human eyes did when concentrating, when caring about an outcome, predator focus. Except it wasn't focused on him as prey. It was focused on him as someone whose opinion mattered, someone they wanted to convince, someone they, dare he think it, wanted as an ally. The application process, Vrell said slowly, requires a probationary period. 5 standard years of monitored membership before full integration. We're aware, Torres said, during which the consortium would need access to detailed reports on military capabilities, conflict resolution methods, cultural integration progress. Also aware, and there would be, undoubtedly, species who would object to humanity's membership purely based on evolutionary background. Hayes smiled, but this time it looked sad rather than threatening. We expected that too. But Captain, we have to try. If we don't, if we stay isolated, we're just proving everyone's worst fears right. That humans are too dangerous, too aggressive, too predatory to join galactic civilization. We don't want to be the species everyone avoids. We want to be the species everyone can count on when things get difficult. Kix finally found their voice. Why? Why does it matter so much? Because, Torres said quietly, being alone is worse than being feared. And because if there's one thing humans excel at besides hunting, it's proving people wrong when they underestimate us. Vrell set down his water glass, looked at his data pad, at all the notes he'd taken throughout the day, the weapons demonstrations, the defense capabilities, the casual competence in the face of danger, all the things that screamed predator species, threat assessment code red, reject application immediately. Then he thought about Hayes putting herself between the delegation and potential danger without being asked. Torres's pride in their fast response time not because they destroyed the hostile vessel, but because they protected everyone on the station. The statistics showing a species actively fighting against its own worst nature. I'll need to file a comprehensive report, Vrell said finally. It will take several days to compile. Hayes's expression didn't change, but something hopeful flickered in her eyes. Of course, take all the time you need, and I'll need to interview more personnel. Get a broader perspective on human culture and capabilities. We can arrange that. And, Vrell added, surprising himself, I'll need someone to explain what coffee is and why you all drink it in such alarming quantities. Torres laughed, a booming sound that made Vrell's ears twitch. Now that, Captain, might be the hardest question you've asked all day. 3 days later, Vrell sat in his temporary quarters aboard the station, staring at his completed report. 247 pages of analysis, observations, interviews, and conclusions that would likely give the Consortium Council collective heart palpitations, or whatever their various species experienced when confronted with information that challenged every assumption they'd held for centuries. He'd interviewed 32 different humans. Engineers, doctors, teachers, janitors, security personnel, even a chef who'd explained the concept of comfort food with such passion that Vrell had actually felt hungry despite his species not requiring solid meals for another 6 hours. Every single one of them had shown that same predator focus when discussing things they cared about. But it was never directed at him as prey. It was directed at problems, challenges, goals. They hunted solutions with the same intensity their ancestors had hunted mammoths. Science Officer Kix knocked on the door frame, entering without waiting for permission. They'd gotten noticeably more comfortable around humans over the past few days. Probably because the station's head of xenobiology, Dr. Maya Okonkwo, had spent 4 hours explaining human evolutionary biology with such enthusiasm that Kix had actually stopped being terrified and started being fascinated. Have you finished the recommendation section? Kix asked, settling into the chair across from Vrell's desk. Just now, Vrell rubbed his eyes, a gesture he'd unconsciously picked up from watching humans. It's going to be controversial. That's an understatement on par with calling a supernova mildly warm. Kix tilted their head. Are you really going to recommend approval? Conditional approval with extensive monitoring protocols? Yes. Vrell pulled up the final page. I don't see an alternative. Rejecting them based purely on evolutionary background sets a dangerous precedent. Plus, and I can't believe I'm saying this, I think we need them. Kix's antennae perked up with interest. Explain. The consortium has been stagnant for 2 centuries. We've built a civilization based on avoiding conflict at all costs, which sounds noble until you realize it means we also avoid difficult decisions, challenging innovations, uncomfortable truths. Vrell gestured at the data floating in holographic form. Humans don't avoid difficult things. They run straight at them with alarming enthusiasm. That perspective, that willingness to confront problems directly, could be exactly what we need. Or it could destabilize everything we've built. It could, Vrell admitted. But stagnation is its own form of death. Just slower. Less obvious. A chime sounded. Lieutenant Hayes's voice came through the communication system. Captain Vrell, Commander Torres requests your presence in Conference Room 3. We've received a priority transmission from the Consortium Council. They want a preliminary assessment before your formal report. Vrell and Kix exchanged glances. That was fast, Kix muttered. Someone's nervous. Conference Room 3 had become oddly familiar over the past few days. Hayes was already there, along with Torres and several other senior staff members. But this time, a massive holographic display dominated one wall, showing the assembled faces of the Consortium Council. 12 species, 12 very concerned expressions. Council Speaker Thrix, a Volusian with impressive cranial ridges, spoke first. Captain Vrell, we've been monitoring reports from your assessment with growing concern. Before you submit formal documentation, we felt a preliminary discussion was warranted. Your observations have been quite alarming. Alarming but accurate, I assume. Torres interjected smoothly. Vrell noticed he'd positioned himself in what appeared to be a casual stance, but was actually perfectly balanced for quick movement, if needed. Even now, even in a diplomatic meeting, humans remained ready. Commander Torres, Thrix continued, no disrespect intended, but your species presents unprecedented challenges. Your military capabilities alone raise serious questions about integration. Our military capabilities have kept this region of space remarkably peaceful, Torres countered. Pirates don't raid human trade routes anymore. They've learned. We have a perfect record of protecting neutral vessels that request escort through dangerous sectors. 0 losses in 3 years. Counselor Vex, a Killian with bioluminescent patterns flickering nervously, leaned forward. But at what cost? How many vessels have you destroyed to achieve that record? Destroyed? None in the past 18 months. Damaged and forced to retreat? 17. But we always offer rescue and medical assistance afterwards, even to hostiles. We're not interested in killing anyone. We're interested in making sure they understand attacking civilians has consequences. Hayes pulled up data streams, displaying incident reports. Every engagement is documented. Rules of engagement are strict. Minimal force necessary to neutralize threats. We've actually been complimented by the Merchant Guild for our restraint. Restraint, Thrix repeated. A predator species discussing restraint. Forgive our skepticism. That's when Vrell stood up. Every eye in the room, human and holographic, turned toward him. His heart was hammering, his prey instincts screaming at him to sit down. Be quiet, don't draw attention. But he'd spent 3 days watching humans ignore their instincts in favor of doing what was right, not what was easy. Council Speaker, with respect, our skepticism is based on prejudice, not evidence. Vrell's voice was steadier than he felt. I came here expecting to reject humanity's application. I was terrified of them. I still am, honestly. But fear is not a valid basis for policy decisions. The council chamber fell silent. Kix made an encouraging gesture from their seat. Vrell continued. Humans are predators, yes. They're aggressive, competitive, and possess military capabilities that frankly put most of our defensive fleets to shame. But they're also the only species I've encountered who actively fights against their own nature, who builds systems specifically designed to prevent them from doing what their biology tells them is natural. He pulled up his own compiled data. They have laws against violence with enforcement rates that exceed consortium averages. They have ethical review boards for scientific research that are more stringent than our own standards. They teach their children conflict resolution starting at age 5. They've created an entire philosophical framework called human rights that applies to everyone, not just their own species. They're trying, Council, harder than any species I've studied. Counselor Mira, a telepathic Serenex, spoke for the first time. Her mental voice resonated through the translator system. Captain Vrell, I sense genuine conviction in your assessment. But what happens when humans stop trying? What happens when the pressure becomes too much and they revert to aggressive patterns? Torres stepped forward. Then you'll have monitoring protocols in place, 5 years of probationary oversight, and multiple opportunities to revoke membership if we fail to meet standards. But Counselor, with respect, you're asking us to prove a negative. To prove we'll never have problems. No species can guarantee that. The Killian-Volusian trade dispute 3 years ago almost came to military conflict, and you're both founding consortium members. Vex's bioluminescence flickered in what might have been embarrassment. The question isn't whether humans are perfect, Vrell said. It's whether they're committed to the same principles the consortium was founded on. Cooperation over conflict. Dialogue over destruction. Progress over stagnation. And based on everything I've observed, they just approach those principles from a different evolutionary starting point. Hayes added quietly, we know we're different. We know we make a lot of species uncomfortable. But isolation isn't the answer. We've tried that in our own history. It never ends well. We want to learn from you, work with you, contribute to something larger than ourselves. Isn't that what the consortium is supposed to be about? The council members conferred silently, their holographic images frozen in deliberation. The humans waited with impressive patience. Vrell noticed Hayes's pupils dilating again as she watched the council, that predator focus activated by stress and uncertainty. But she stayed perfectly still, perfectly professional. Finally, Thrick spoke. Captain Vrell, submit your formal report. The council will review it thoroughly. Commander Torres, Lieutenant Hayes, humanity's application will proceed to full assessment. We make no promises, but your arguments have been noted. The connection terminated. The room exhaled collectively. Torres turned to Vrell, extending his hand in that human gesture. Thank you, Captain. You didn't have to defend us. Vrell took the hand, felt the firm grip, the warmth of human skin, the controlled strength that could have crushed his bones but instead conveyed only respect. I defended the truth. What the council does with it is their decision. Hayes smiled, and for the first time, Vrell didn't feel the instinctive urge to flee. You know what this means, right? If they approve membership, humans are going to show up at consortium headquarters and make everyone very, very nervous. I know, Vrell said. But maybe a little nervousness is what we need. Maybe being too comfortable is its own kind of danger. Kix laughed, a chittering sound of relief and exhaustion. Captain Vrell, defender of apex predators. The other xenobiologists are never going to believe this. Then they should have come on the assessment themselves, Vrell replied. He looked around the conference room, at the humans who'd spent 3 days patiently answering invasive questions, demonstrating capabilities that terrified him, and proving over and over that choosing to be civilized was more impressive than being bred for it. 6 months later, the Consortium Council approved humanity's provisional membership by a margin of 7 votes to 5. The announcement caused chaos in some sectors, celebration in others, and a lot of very nervous prey species updating their defensive protocols just in case. But Vrell, watching the news from his own vessel halfway across the galaxy, felt something unexpected. Hope. Because if a species of persistence predators could decide to protect instead of hunt, to cooperate instead of compete, to build instead of destroy, then maybe the rest of the galaxy could learn to be braver too. And maybe, just maybe, that was exactly the lesson the consortium needed to learn. That evolution determined where you started, not where you chose to go, though Vrell still maintained a healthy respect for human pupils that dilated when focused. Some instincts, he decided, were worth keeping. So what did you think? Did this story surprise you? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this sci-fi story, please hit the like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe for more mind-blowing science fiction stories every week. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching. and I'll see you in the next story.